Today, a fun discussion with my good buddy David Archer, a longtime pro body Nikon DSLR shooter, on why the Z9 has finally blown away his mirrorless reluctance, what he loves about it, what he doesn't love so much about it. Plus, my video setup guide to the Z9 is live in 4 parts and they're linked here. I'll tell you about them. Hey everybody, it's Hudson. Welcome to this week's Approaching the Scene. I just wrapped up doing my full setup guide to the Nikon Z9. It's really comprehensive. It comes in 4 parts. The first part's a doozy because it goes through all the menus and everything and kind of setting it up and customizing it for my standard shooting mode. And then the next 3 videos go through tweaking that for action, tweaking it for landscape, tweaking it for astro. Those are linked in this video's description. Just click on the video's title or show more. I'm going to introduce those, set them up just a little bit, and then we have a fun conversation in store with my good friends Rick LePage and David Archer. David has amazing action and wildlife photographer who's been shooting with pro build Nikon big DSLRs for years and years. This is his 4th body, I think, and he's finally decided mirrorless is the way to go and the DSLR is gone. He's replaced his D5 with this. So we'll talk to him about what he loves and what he wishes were a little bit different. Before we jump into that conversation, I want to make sure everyone knows they're invited to the office hours that we're holding on February 15th. We're inviting you to submit 1 image each. The instructions are on the website, hudsonhenry.com/office hours. You can leave us a question while you're dropping off your image, but we're going to go through and we're going to look at all of your images, one of your favorite winter images. So Rick and I and the gang are going to dive in, go through that gallery. You can look through the gallery in advance. This community submits amazing, amazing images, and I'm really proud every time we do this, and it's fun. So I can't wait to look at the winter world through all of your lenses, and I hope you'll all submit. All right. Everything I talk about, again, all my camera gear and the Z9 stuff in particular is linked at hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. Those links help me out. I appreciate your using them. I have some more tripod parts coming in. You all have been buying custom tripods from me as fast as I can build them, but I just want to remind everybody I'm building the fluid head and the ultralight tripods totally ready to go out of the box, so hit me up about that. All right, so these videos, these setup videos, quick before we talk to David, I just wrapped them up. I'm recording the menus and the camera, talking about what I'm doing. And the first video is long. You know, the reference guide for this camera, which I suggest if you own, you download to your mobile device and have it available for offline access, is almost 1,000 pages long. There's a lot of new settings, a lot of new stuff. Back in the day when I shot with the Nikon DSLRs, they were simpler and I never really used the settings banks very much. But this camera has so much capacity to do so many different things and so many menu options that I think the banks become a really powerful tool. That and the fact that a lot of us use the user settings on the Z cameras that preceded this. And this is a way to get that kind of functionality. It's slightly different. We'll talk about that mostly in that first video, how to customize, how to name them, how to easily access them, how to set up the iMenu, how to customize the buttons, go through every menu option, at least superficially, many of them drilling down into more detail, especially the ones that I love to use. It's a long video, and there was no way around it being a long video. Then there are 3 follow-up videos setting up different custom settings menu banks and different shooting menu banks to be primed for shooting action, for shooting landscape, and for shooting astro. So those videos are linked in this video's description. They're also just up there on the YouTube channel. I hope you enjoy them. Let me know any feedback that you have. And now let's talk to David about his first few weeks with the Z9. Well, hey everybody, I thought it would be really fun to talk with David Archer. I got Rick LePage here too, but I thought it would be fun to talk to David Archer about the Nikon Z9. Because David, much more than Rick or I, or most of the people that I know, you've been shooting with a big pro body for a long time.
I have. This is my 4th one. Started with the D3, had that for a while, then went to the D4S, and then went to the D5, which I shot for the last 5 years and been totally happy with it. But when the Z9 came out, I could see the difference coming and just had to get on the list for one. So
And you've been a mirrorless holdout. I mean, you've got a Z6 too, but you really were waiting for this camera.
That's right. Hudson and I recorded video a couple of years ago where he was going mirrorless, and I was going, I'm going to wait. I'm holding out. I don't know if
Although
it's
we
for
did
me.
that other video with DC where he was shooting the new A9 at the time, and we had the D5, and you're like, well, it's pretty good.
Right. Yeah. So here I'm coming over to the dark side.
So you've been working with it for a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and you love it. You're not giving it back. What
Nope,
are some of
not
the things
sending
you
it
really
back.
love about it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's, well, a lot of the things that were anticipated, like the 20 frames per second, is very cool. I was used to 12 frames a second, but it does make a difference when you're shooting birds and things, and to get that perfect wing movement, the different positions that are different between the shots. It's more shots to go through, but the end result is better, I think.
Let's look at just a couple of David's. Look at David's bird shots for just a second here. You seeing that, David?
Yeah, I'm seeing it now.
These are just a few of your Z9 shots from the last couple of weeks. David's just a
Right.
wildlife. He's a great photographer in general, but a wildlife photographer extraordinaire. And these
Thanks.
pelicans are so razor sharp.
Yeah, this is from my kayak. I bought a kayak to get out closer to wildlife and get some different shots than what everybody else was getting. And so I was able to find these. There's a concrete structure out in the lake, and I paddled out to that and got Three Stooges posing there.
It's pretty amazing, the eye detect, how it just locks eyes and it keeps them just razor sharp. This is a beautiful shot, David.
Yeah.
I love your
Also
eye.
on the same trip, just noticed an occasional single feather floating around, and it just thought I could make something out of it. And
Those diagonal lines.
Yep. And what were you shooting this with?
this was the Z9 and the 500 PF.
Gotcha.
And it was late afternoon, golden hour. The sun was just going down, and you could catch some gold in part of the leaf.
Yep.
This shot was from my first time out with the Z6 at a local place called Magnolia Cemetery here in Charleston, South Carolina, where I live. This is a tricolored heron.
This is we've had fun at that cemetery and workshops, and I think we may have to get back down there.
I think so.
In 2023 for another Charleston workshop. It's been too long, and it's so much fun. This one's just awesome, David.
Yeah, I believe this was my second trip out. This is at Magnolia Plantation, also in Charleston. This is
Another
green
great
wing
spot.
teal. Yeah,
A green wing what?
green wing teal type of a duck.
It's a beautiful bird.
This is the male.
You know,
got
and
some
that eye
motion.
detect. Wow.
Yeah, the eye detect locked right down. This was shot, I believe, at 1/12/50th, so to freeze the body and the eye, but still give a little motion to the wings and the water droplets. I like kind of like the way
So
they
are you just
stream.
cranking it up to 20 frames a second for this stuff?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
Get that perfect moment. It's not something that I find I want to do all the time because you wind up with a gajillion big files, but God, I love how the wingtips drag in the water here and the reflection, David.
Yeah, and the kayak is good too because it puts you right down at water level too, and you can catch them when they're going across. I like the little wing dip in the
I love that wing dip.
water. Kind of get, and it was golden hour, so I got a little reflection too. This shot is actually in my yard, just from my front porch. We have kind of a nature type yard, and we feed the birds with all kinds of things and attract them in. And I put some little driftwood perches out where you don't see the bird feeder. This is a female oriole.
So sharp.
Yeah, this is the 500 again?
Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing. Just gorgeous. And it's probably wide open too, huh?
Actually, I believe that one is the 400 2.8.
Uh-huh. Oh, that makes sense. Because it's just so ripping sharp.
Yeah, because in the
And then
background
this
screen.
This is insane.
Yeah, this to me was the ultimate test of the new AF system. because these are tree swallows. They're tiny little birds. They fly really, really fast, really erratically, and don't come nearly as close enough to you as you'd like. But I was able to lock into this one just as he was about to devour that bug.
Wow.
Which you can barely see, but
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
it's just nuts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I was to zoom in here, just so people can see, that's a little bug
Yeah.
right here that this bird is about to get, and that's a nutso shot. That's the kind of thing that the Z9 really does make possible. I mean, I feel like when I was shooting birds in flight down in Mexico, and when I was shooting kite surfers and wing foilers, it was almost like cheating because, I mean, I'm used to in the DSLR age or in the auto area, autofocus age, seeing that I'm kind of on the body of the bird. Shooting with Rick's A1, shooting with DC's A9, I have seen the eye detect light up on birds, and it's pretty amazing. Now having that with 20 frames a second, raw is pretty nuts. When you're in that moment where things are happening really fast, and still it's tracking the eye or the face or the head and shoulders of your subject. It feels a little bit like cheating. It feels a little bit like cheating.
Yeah.
So
And the
so what else
and the-
what else in the Z9 has really sort of made you go bye bye D5? I mean, I
yeah,
know the blackout is something we've talked about in the past.
yeah, yeah. The blackout was intolerable for me with the Z6 too. The autofocus was fine; it would lock onto to a bird in flight, but then you'd be looking at where the bird had been instead of where the bird was. So it was really hard to track. You could adjust
I,
to it, but I just kept with the D5, which
Yeah,
was
I did adjust to it, and I found myself shooting wider and cropping more, and using the Z7 II where you can crop more, but it was, it took adjusting to. There's no doubt about it. And
yeah,
with the Z9, there is zero blackout. I mean, it just gives you a little indicator that images are being taken with its dual stream, one to the sensor,
Yeah.
one to the memory card, one to the viewfinder. It's nuts. It's cool.
yeah. It's incredible. And one thing that I didn't really anticipate being such a big deal, but it's now DX mode with all the megapixels for the Z9. You can zoom into DX mode, cut your file size in half, still have plenty of resolution. And so you've faster shots, less on the buffer, but less storage space requirements too, and still great images. So that's a big thing that I didn't fully appreciate until I got it.
You and I were talking about that, and I actually integrated your button shortcut into the setup guide that's releasing at the same time as this video. And I did a little test, and I have that really fast, kind of expensive pro grade Cobalt card for this to keep the frame rate up with the full resolution raw files. And I
Like
can get
that
about
too.
I can get 90 maybe raw files, the uncompressed or the what it's not uncompressed, it's lossless
Yeah.
compression raw files. But in the APS-C in the DX mode, it's unlimited. I hit 200 now. I was like, okay, I guess I can just stop the test because it's just kept running, and that's a pretty cool feature. Plus, I think the 850 in the DSLR age had that high megapixel count and had the DX mode, and it gave you, even more reach with your long lenses that you could be using. But it was awkward in the same way that using frame guidelines on a rangefinder is kind of awkward. You're looking through the lens through a kind of a fixed viewfinder, and you get a kind of a frame guide while you're only really working with this much area. With this, you flip that switch, and all of a sudden, you get the view of DX full framing your big, beautiful viewfinder. You get a closer up view of, if you're working with something that's a long way away and you're going to crop anyway, you're still going to get a 24 megapixel file. You're getting as many megapixels as you would with the D5 or the D500. You're getting that big, beautiful view that you would with a DX camera. You're getting a file size that's half the size you'd be getting that you're going to crop away anyway, and a frame rate that stands up forever at 20 frames a second raw if you need it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I,
I'm using it a lot.
I would say, yeah, I mean, watching you for the last few years carry the D500, the 500 PF and the teleconverters, it's like, it seems like that's gone now. You don't need to take an extra camera body. You can use
Yeah.
this camera to do the work of both those cameras.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
Although there's a couple little lackings that they, with regard to using it as a landscape camera from my perspective, but they're minor. They're certainly, you can work around them. There's reasons I'd probably prefer the Z7 II as my landscape camera. Not necessarily for astro. This camera brings some stuff to the table for astrophotography, like view modes that are optimized to not blow your night vision, and everything goes red on the camera, and it has this even better low light autofocus than the Z6 and Z7, which is crazy because they're so good. You can focus on planets with them. You can focus on stars with this. But still, David, you're so used to a big, heavy camera. I still love the form factor of having something a little smaller, lighter, more packable, and take on big adventures where I'm hauling a bunch of extra stuff with me too. But I'm getting used to it, and I'm certainly not giving it back. I know you told me that you spent as much time as I did looking for exposure delay mode when you were first setting it up.
Yeah. I did. 15 minutes of my life I'll never get back.
I'm like, where did they hide it? And then you realize, okay, they took the shutter away, so they decided shutter shake's not an issue now. We don't need exposure delay mode. But for me, exposure delay mode was that thing that kept me from needing to get a wireless remote out or connect a cable release in and not shake the camera with my hand when I'm doing long exposures. And I took some flack for this over on the Fred Miranda forums because I chimed in on something. Somebody was talking about me and somehow it popped up, and I chimed in that it was a bummer that exposure delay mode was gone, and people were like, well, you can use your timer mode. And timer mode has a whole lot of settings you might want to use to take selfies, to do other kinds of things. So you can adjust it to where it takes a single shot, but you have to wait 2 seconds. That's the shortest duration of the timer, whereas exposure delay gave us 0.2 seconds, 0.5 seconds, 1 second, 2 second, 3 second.
And you have to switch to the timer mode. You have to switch the dial.
Yeah.
With the exposure delay, you can put it in the eye menu.
Yeah,
and
tap.
Yeah.
And the thing that, if I'm doing a 20 frame panorama, 2 rows of 10, let's say, and I want a little bit longer exposure and I'm worried about shaking the camera with each one, I loved setting it for 0.2 seconds and click, move, click, move, click, move, click, move. With this, I got to click 1,000, 2, 1,000, move, click 1,000, 2, 1,000, move. I mean, it's just not click, move, click, move, click, move. And shooting a number of panoramas, you start wasting a lot of time in changing light. So I don't know. It's minor, but it's a bummer. That and dumbing down the bracketing. I'm sure they took flack from people that didn't understand single direction bracketing, the -2, -3, +2, +3.
Yeah. And on the positive side, I'm really liking the silent shutter too. Because one of the only things I didn't like about the D5 was it was so loud. It was like a machine gun, and it would startle the birds.
Yeah.
Even in my yard.
I'm sure event and wedding photographers feel exactly the same way. Between the eye detect and being dead quiet, that's got to be so nice for people, whether it's wildlife or whether it's events that you don't want to disturb. Or, we might see a complete change very soon with, those press conferences where you hear the person say, that's all for now, and you hear all those pro cameras. Now it's just going to be quiet.
Yeah.
Some flash strobes happening.
So on the autofocus front, we had the A1 last year that came out, and the Z9 was sort of stepping up on the autofocus side. You guys feel that the Z9 is at that level or slightly higher? I mean,
I think they're Apple. I mean, on the one hand, it's apples versus apples because we're talking about autofocus systems of the latest mirrorless flagships. But the systems they work in a slightly different way. I will argue that Nikon, when they originally came out with the original Z6 and Z7, the autofocus was fully half-baked, and they took a lot of flack, and they deserved it. Then they came out with a really aggressive campaign of firmware updates that really brought that autofocus to a very usable state, but you had to learn it. I've been teaching YouTube class after YouTube, video explaining how to use the autofocus, working with people in workshops. And once you really learn it, it works great. But you had to manipulate it and switch modes and things. This is the first one that they've come out with where, like I showed in my video last week, I handed it to my friend Jasmine. She's never worked with a mirrorless camera. Her camera is a Canon 5D Mark II, so this is a complete foreign object. And I spent a couple minutes showing her how the autofocus worked in my hybrid mode, and I went out kite surfing, and she, I unfortunately left it in 20 frames a second unintentionally, and she shot about 1,900 frames, and I would say there were maybe 20 or 30 that weren't razor sharp on her subject. I mean, it's easy to use in the same way that your Sony is easy to use. There's nothing I would complain about the A9 or the A1's autofocus system. There's nothing I'd complain about the Sony R5's autofocus system I spent a month, or the Canon R5 autofocus system that I spent time with. There's nothing to complain about this autofocus system. All of them are dead simple and work great. There's a few, everybody's got their little quirks that might be better, might be worse. I think Nikon's auto subject detection could be really cool for travel photography, where 1 minute you're shooting a human, 1 minute you're shooting an animal, 1 minute you're shooting a boat. It can, I feel like it works a little better if you pick which one's important to you when you really know what you're doing. When I'm shooting birds, I want animal. When I'm shooting kite surfers, I want human. And that way, if a kite surfer flies into the back of the photo while I'm shooting a pelican, it doesn't suddenly switch to the kite surfer at that perfect moment, or vice versa. It always defaults to people, then animals, then vehicles. And it's cool that it can do that, but there's little tweaks on each one. It's dead simple to use. It's good. It's certainly caught up, which is impressive from Nikon, because I really feel like Nikon has always worked in a lot like software companies. They come out with a version 1 and then a 1.5 before version 2 comes out. And let's face it, this is the first wave of version 2 for Nikon.
Yeah.
I mean, the Z7 II and the Z6 II and the ZFC are really Z7.5, Z6.5, Z50.5. This is 2, and they caught up quick.
Yeah.
Canon deserves a lot of credit for getting all their ducks in a row and coming out with some pretty amazing products right out of the gate. But both companies caught up quick.
Yeah.
And they needed to.
Yep.
It's survival. And this camera is not going to disappoint. Like, you look at David. David's a D5 flagship Nikon. You're a flagship user for a long time now.
Yeah.
And you're happily putting the DSLR to rest now. Yep. There you
I
go.
can't see going back.
Well, there you go. Enough said. Hey, David, thanks so much for hanging out with us, showing us your beautiful images, giving us, as I lose my headphone here, giving us your first impressions of this camera that I don't know anybody's really complaining about, including myself. I'm enjoying the heck out of it.
Did you want to talk about any of the slight negatives?
Well, give us a list of things that bug you about it. Why not? Let's keep it rolling for another second.
All right, just a couple things. The very small thing, but the latch on the memory card door is implemented kind of in a not very good fashion compared to the D5 and the D4S. It's a small thing, but it was done so much better in the previous cameras.
It's just really hard. It's hard to pop open. You have to really get at it. And particularly if it's on a tripod, it makes you kind of rock your tripod off balance to get it moving. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's awkward. And then another small thing, I appreciate that they moved the play button to the right side, but the delete button is still on the left side. And so it's still awkward if you're holding camera with a long lens.
And you want to call. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's like halfway to what they needed to do.
Yeah. But I'm adjusting.
Well, you got the play button in the right place. We've been living that on the Sony side forever. So
I know.
Glad to see you caught up finally.
Yeah.
Well, Nikon does things very incrementally. They're very careful about not changing the user interface too much to make the camera feel uncomfortable to a longtime Nikon user. And that play button being in the top left was no big deal when the only way to review your images was on the back, because you drop the camera down and your hand's right there. you're not holding it by the lens anymore but with the mirrorless age, we want to do it through the viewfinder without taking our eye out of it, and having that instantly accessible with your right thumb and not having to move your hand back to the back of the camera.
Yeah.
But you're right, now you still have to do it to delete an image, and you can't map delete to any of the custom buttons, so
I don't think so.
yeah, agreed.
You can map the play button back to function 4 if you really want to keep it the way it was.
Yeah.
If
And
you
I've
have
heard people doing that, and I'm like, well, think about it, but you
Yeah.
might like it in the new spot better if
Yeah.
you start reviewing your images in the viewfinder, which is a better experience.
Yeah.
So, anything else?
No, I think that's about it. The top display is ever so slightly smaller than it was in the D5, which is not a big deal.
It displays a bit less information too.
Yeah.
I felt that coming from DSLR to mirrorless, but it's nice that it's there. The other thing I'll say is, I get on this soapbox a lot, but the inability to preview depth of field at apertures smaller than f5.6 when the view is magnified in still mode. It's only a limitation in still mode. It works in video mode. You see your final aperture all the time. Filmmakers need to know what the background looks like while they're filming. In still mode, they limit you. It stopping down at f5.6. If you go to f8, you don't see that unless you hit depth of field preview. If you zoom in to check and see if your mountains are in focus at f11, and then hit depth of field preview to see f11, it jumps back to fit view and you can't tell. And it's just a limitation that's been the case of every single mirrorless camera, and it wasn't the case in live view on any of the DSLRs, and I felt like it was a landscape dream to be able to zoom into that view and make sure that I had hyperfocal distance perfect. And I can't do it. On the mirrorless cameras, it's more trial and error. Take the shot, review it, adjust. It works, but I mean, why don't they just give us that? Anyhow, I'm off my soapbox for another second. Doesn't make sense to me. All right. Well, again, I'll thank you once again, David, because sharing those beautiful images. I can't wait to shoot more images with you. For those of you who haven't been out with Rick and David and I on workshops, we have a blast.
We do.
And it's a great group we are. So can't wait to get the band back together and have the A1 and the Z9s out in the field racking off silent images at crazy frame rates. And
Rick, it's always good
fun
to
to
run
hear what
into
your
you
thoughts
too on workshops.
Yeah.
There's a little inside joke there for those who were in the Tetons with us all. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Take care, David.
See ya.
All right, everybody, that was fun. I'm loving this camera just as much as everybody else. It's got some amazing capabilities. Don't forget those setup videos are live. They're linked in this video's description. Let me know what you think of them. And I hope to see you in the office hours on February 15th, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific. Sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours and leave us your favorite winter photo. We're going to go through those photos. We're going to look at the world through your eyes. Can't wait. I hope everybody is staying creative, staying safe, having fun. We'll see you next week.